Junior Volleyball Association presents Sideline Strategy, a volleyball podcast. Today's episode is called Early Season Strategies for Developing a Unified and Mentally Strong Team. This episode comes from a pre-recorded webinar that was presented by Coaching Clout.
The name of my company is called Coaching Clout, and we work with, as Erin mentioned, various businesses, collegiate teams, athletic departments, clubs, and corporate clients. And we really pride ourselves on providing practical and immediately applicable training in the areas of communication, leadership, observation, understanding, and teamwork. Today, we're going to talk about the success of your team, and that's going to be a factor. There's a lot of factors, right, that go into our success. Whether it's the established skills that your team comes to the table with, whether it's the physical training that you provide for them. We're going to focus on early season strategies today, specifically in the areas of mental strength and unity. We're going to call those two areas the X factor areas. Those are the two areas that are going to make or break or be the differentiator between your team and your opponents. I'm going to use a building metaphor as we go throughout this webinar. I think we can all relate to watching that house being built, that it looks like nothing's happening and all of a sudden, it goes up. So we're going to be talking about and using a building metaphor today. Part of the reason for that is I'm renovating my house, so I feel this metaphor right now. So here we go. There's 4 components or cornerstones of our early season training. We have the planning phase, the building phase, the teaching phase, and the recommit cornerstone. So right now, we're all in the preseason, right? We haven't started, we're gearing up, we're getting excited. And there's a couple things to keep in mind throughout this preseason. One is to recognize that your team right now is not a team. It's actually just a group of players that are on a roster at this point. Even if your team has everybody returning, they're still a year older. Every year is so different, and it's going to take some time to nourish and help create that group of people to become a team. We call them a team, but they aren't until we've helped them go through that process. Another thing to keep in mind during this preseason phase that you're in right now is to take more time planning to help your team become more unified and mentally tougher than your opponents. Most of us are pretty comfortable with training physicality and those drills and skills that we're going to be training. But let's plan right now and mentally prepare for taking more time to build the cohesion of our team and the mentality or mental aspects. Prepare to hold your players more accountable for that mentality and the behavior. Okay. Right now, most of us aren't that comfortable with it because we haven't been trained. Hopefully that's why you're interested in listening to this, so that we can become more comfortable. But right now, commit to that, I guess, is what I'm asking you to do. Decide what you want your signatures to be. What do you want other coaches to say after they played you? That first tournament or that mid-season tournament. What is the coach gonna go tell their friends and their other coaches, or even come up to you and go, wow, you guys, you did not let a ball drop. Your defensive effort was amazing. So a couple things that go into creating your signatures or thinking about your signatures. One is, what do you value as a coach? What are the things that you really want to be your earmarks? What are the strengths of your personnel? Those are going to end up being some of your signatures as well. And another way to look at it is, how do you want other people to talk about you? So think about that a little bit. And here's a really, really big one. I know for me, this is huge, and that is to prepare to be patient. Patience, if we take our house analogy, when we're building a house, right, we've got to lay the plans, we've got to grade the land, we got to pour the foundation, we go into framing stages, and all that takes so much time that we're even thinking at some point, like, is this house ever going up? Did they run out of money, or what's going on? So let's prepare now to be really patient through this early phase so that once we build the house, the foundation is strong. Mentality and team unity, to me, are the most overlooked and underprepared aspects of coaching. And you know, that's why I'm really excited that you're listening to this right now, because obviously you find those as important as I do. Quote that I really love is not showing up, I don't think, on your slide. If you don't have time to do it right, how will you find time to do it over? Bottom line, oh, actually I skipped ahead a little bit. That's gonna come up here soon. Basically, bottom line, become comfortable with the idea that things are gonna be a little bit messy in the early part of the season. It might not be pretty, but you're laying the foundations, you're establishing the expectations for the whole rest of the season. So we don't really have a second shot to start our season. So let's make sure we go through this process really methodically. These are the things that are going to help your team perform better as the season progresses. Here's that quote that I love. I'm going to repeat it. If you don't have time to do it right, how will you find time to do it over? Okay, so we've talked about our planning cornerstone, the first aspect of building our house. Now let's talk about building, okay, and what foundation are we going to create? Research shows that the #1 requirement for a team to be successful is trust. And so we're talking about trust in each other. We're talking about building trust in you as the coach. You want your athletes to have trust in your system. You want your athletes to have trust in the club philosophy. And very, very importantly, you want to make sure that your athletes have trust in themselves. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the building phase. And we're going to start that building phase with icebreakers. Icebreakers can be a really short, we're only going to do it for probably the first 2 weeks, maybe. Maybe we do some icebreakers at the first meeting, and then maybe we follow that up at the first practice. We really don't need to do it for much more than that. Really what we're looking for is just to help our athletes be more relaxed, to develop some familiarity with each other. Our icebreakers are going to be fun and light, energetic. They're going to be simple. We don't need to make them real complex and take a long time. I think it's a good name, icebreaker, right? It's just to break that tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of games out there you can Google and find a ton of icebreakers. We all kind of have our favorites. Some of my favorites, BizBuzz is a numbers game. So is 1-2 Snap. You can look those up, or you can ask me how they work later. One-word stories I really like because it's an icebreaker, but it's also really collaborative. And so your team is working together, break them into groups of 2 or 3 or 4, and we develop and build this story one word at a time. They end up being pretty funny, and they go very fun places. Human Knot is another opportunity for your team to break that ice, and really it's a little bit more physical. Some people like that. I'm sure that you have your favorite icebreakers, but really that's just an opportunity to kind of get started along the lines of building this trust that we need. The next phase in building that trust is trust formation. And I'm not sure this is a real word, but a friend of mine came up with this and I really liked it, so I'm borrowing it from her. And this is an opportunity for some deeper self-reflection than icebreakers have. They're gonna have some deeper sharing, and most importantly, what we're looking for in this area is for them to be able to show vulnerability to each other, really open up and share with each other. So when we're building this trust or creating this trust formation, we're not talking about the trust where I fall backwards and my teammates catch me and now we trust each other. we're talking about specifically creating exercises or opportunities for our team to show vulnerability with each other. So icebreakers we're only going to do for maybe the first 2 weeks. Trust formation we're going to do for about the first quarter or 2 months roughly of your season. If we need to revisit them later, then we'll do that. But just really, we just want to have this be a little bit longer experience. I know most of you probably it's a 7-8 month season. Some of you it might be a little bit shorter, but when we're talking about early season, I'm thinking about right about the first quarter. And actually looking at the makeup of our people that are on right now, 25% in all 4 areas, that was symmetry. So as we go through this trust formation phase, there's 2 things that I want to make sure that my athletes always do. One is to show eye contact with their teammates, and 2 is to own whatever it is that they're talking about. So, for example, one of the things that I do with every group that I work with, corporate or collegiate or club, whatever it might be, I love this particular exercise. It, we've adapted 2 truths and a lie and made it 2 strengths and a challenge, basically. Again, I'm good at borrowing things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the athletes to write down a physical strength. That should be fairly easy for them to figure out. Then I'm going to ask them for a mental strength. And this can be attitude, it can be behavior, it can be mentality, but something that is a non-physical strength that they have. And then I'm going to ask them for a challenge. So what is it going forward? And my preference is to have that also be a mental challenge. We're going to have a pretty good idea of each other's physical strengths and challenges, but mentally, I want to have them engage with each other, have an opportunity to respond, and have an opportunity for you to get a feel for where your athletes are. So we go around in a circle, and I'm going to start with their physical strength. I'm going to say, okay, and they're going to talk about it. Here's a couple things that we got to make sure that we hold them accountable to. One, when they are engaging or sharing with their teammates, they've got to have eye contact. They're going to want to look at you and talk to you. And most of the time, they're going to look down at their paper and read what they wrote. So we're trying to get out of that. We're trying to help them create this trust and this bond. So we're going to ask them to show each other eye contact. So we might just have to interrupt them and go, I'm sorry, but can you tell your teammates that strength? The second thing that I mentioned is they've got to own their strengths, right? So they're not a pretty good passer. They're a great passer. If they've decided that's a strength, it can't be a hedge. It can't be, well, I think no, you are. You're a really good passer. All right. So just a couple thoughts there. They're going to be uncomfortable with that at first. That's okay. That's part of this whole process. Another thing that you could do possibly in the trust formation phase is to do personal histories. I know that some athletes are young, but they still have a personal history. They still have siblings. They still have things that have happened to them. They still have people in their family that they admire. Situational stories would be something like, hey, we're going to play our big rival in the first tournament that we play. What's that going to look like? Maybe we break them into groups of 3 and we say, hey, how are we going to look when we walk out onto the court? What's that going to feel like? And have them come up with situational stories. Another might be a scenario. You set forth a scenario that says, gosh, your teammate's really struggling. How can we help her? How can we help her push through when things are tough or when she's feeling a little bit negative right now? And put forth a few scenarios so that they can work through those, and then you can facilitate them sharing those ideas. Guided journals are a really good option. If basically you buy them a 50-cent journal from, dare I say, at Walmart, and guide them through different things that you're looking for them to answer. What did you do really well in practice today? Give me 3 things. What are you looking forward to at the tournament next week? Quotes are a great thing to use. I love quotes. I love athletes sharing quotes and why they're meaningful to them. There are some great books out there if you want to facilitate this trust formation stage by using a book. It makes it very methodical, and it's a really cool way to do it. Maybe even questionnaires, and your questionnaires can be really simple. They can be 3 to 5 questions and rank yourself in the following areas today, or whatever it might be. So just some different options there as you go through the first 2 months. Now, really important in this phase that you're consistent with it. So if you do it once and then bail on it, it's not going to have the same impact, and it's not going to have the same effect. So it's important that whether it's once a week, whether it's once every 2 weeks, whether it's every practice we do some exercise, whatever it is that you decide, just make sure that it's consistent. Another area that for me I will always use in the trust formation phase is called DISC. DISC stands for dominant, inspiring, supportive, and cautious. And basically what that is it's a self-assessment tool that is developed through research, and it helps us to understand and explore various personality styles. Another reason that I really like and will always use DISC with every group that I work with is it's an objective, non-judgmental method of understanding ourselves and others that we're working with. The reason I like DISC probably more than the other tools, be it Myers-Briggs or the colors or animals, is it provides a really positive perspective and focus as it disseminates the information to us. So I just really like the way that the information is disseminated with DISC. It's simple, it's easy, but more importantly, it's really positive. There's a couple different ways we can go about learning about our athletes and understanding their personality styles and having them understand each other's personality styles. We can facilitate it just in a pretty basic way. We can have them take a paper assessment. To be honest, right now, about 99.9% of the clients that we work with take an online assessment. It's about a 15 to 20 minute investment in time that will have more benefits than really any other tool out there. So for $12.95 per assessment, it's a pretty small input for an amazing amount of output. So basically, if you can't tell, DISC is my MVP. I mean, I use this tool as a building block, as one of my trust formation building blocks. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. I just want to give you a little bit of a feeling of how you can use DISC and some of the information that you're going to get out of it. So I'm just going to go through different strengths that each of our four different personality styles provide. Our dominant, inspiring, supportive, and cautious. Our dominant style is outgoing and task-oriented, and the strengths of that particular personality style, they tend to be decisive, driven, demanding. They're doers, and those are strengths that come naturally to that particular personality style. Our inspiring style, our outgoing and people-oriented style have different strengths. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different. And so your athletes are going to learn and understand that the strengths of our inspiring style is they tend to be naturally really interactive. They're great at influencing others. They can actually imagine you coming back after getting slaughtered in the first set, and they're really into it. And so it's really nice for our teammates and our coaches to understand these different strengths. Our supportive style has different strengths. This is the more reserved but people-oriented style. First, they tend to be really sweet. They're steady, they're stable, they're sentimental. Basically, our supportive personality style cares more about the success of the team than they care about their own success. That's an athlete I want represented on my team. I want to at least have one. I have bad news. I'm not very supportive. I am not the sweetest person you'll ever meet, but that's okay. I've practiced it, and I'm a lot nicer than I used to be. Finally, our cautious style, or our careful style. has different strengths. They're not better, they're not worse. We're just wired differently. And naturally, they tend to be more careful. They're naturally more conscientious, contemplative, and calculating. They also usually are correct. And so try not to get into too many arguments with your cautious style, whether they're your athletes or your co-coaches or yourself. Okay, moving on. That's just a kind of a snapshot looking at some of the information that you would receive from taking a DISC assessment. Now, really important as we go through this, that all of our athletes and coaches understand that we all have each of these within us. So we are all some really cool, unique blending of these different personality styles. So we're made up of all four of them, which is cool. And hopefully our teams are made up of all four of them too. A couple other reasons, just to bring this home a little bit with why I think DISC is a vital tool in this building trust formation phase, is that it helps us to recognize and embrace our own strengths. Really important, if I want to build and develop a mentally strong team, I really want to make sure my athletes all embrace their strengths. I also want to make sure that my athletes respect and appreciate the strengths of others, even if they might be different than theirs, right? So we've all had athletes on our team that can't relate to other athletes. And now, once they see that these other athletes have different strengths that might be different than theirs, now all of a sudden the respect and the appreciation goes up, okay? We might not have conflicts because we have a better understanding of this than if we're in the mid-season and we start to develop a conflict and we have to go backwards. So we're gonna use DISC very early. We can do DISC in the preseason as well. We can have them take that assessment really early. It's a simple, non-threatening form of communication. We all have this language of DISC that everybody understands, and we're gonna carry that out onto the court. So one of the things I really like about DISC is it's a really good bridge to moving mentality and skill training onto the court. So we're going to use it throughout the season. So your team takes these personality assessments online, and part of what you would get is this graphic depiction of what your team looks like. Now, those circles are going to be names, right? So we're going to know where each of our athletes sits on the circle. Just in case you think that teams all look the same, there's another team that I've worked with, really different. So these teams are going to be, every team you work with is going to have a really different look. And that's part of why I love what I do, because every situation is different, every team is different. And that's why we love coaching, right? Because, you know, we're always problem solving and always figuring out what makes this particular team tick. Here's the thing, you have a pretty good feel already for your areas of strength and the areas that we're going to need to continue to grow and help our team be mentally tougher in. All right, so we have gone through the planning stage and we have gone through the building of trust formation, and now we're going to talk about teaching mentality. A couple concepts that we want to keep in mind here when we're teaching mentality and behavior. And I tend to use those a little bit interchangeably. But the first concept here is when you're training mentality and behavior, be obvious about it, right? We're obvious in our skill development, and we tell them exactly what we're training when it's physical skills. So do the same thing in the mental skill areas. Be specific. Be specific. Most of this training and teaching is going to be on court. You're going to do some off court chalk talks or whatever it might be, but mostly if we can keep it on court, I think that it's more beneficial. I would always start with DISC because, again, it's simple, it's positive, and we can build on it as we go throughout the season. The more you incorporate mental and behavioral training into the physical training that you do, the more effective it's going to be, right? So we don't need to reinvent new drills. We're going to use the same drills that we use in our physical training, but there are going to be times where we're going to incorporate the mental and behavioral side of things. We'll get into that in a little bit here. One really important thing is to consistently emphasize process over outcome. Outcome is important, right? We have an outcome every time we step on the court. So to pretend and ignore outcome doesn't make any sense. But that doesn't mean that process is not more important than the outcome. Your athletes will always look to outcome, and it's up to us to consistently emphasize the process over the outcome and to help them to understand that it's the process that creates the outcome. And that's where a little bit of a disconnect might happen. When you see progress, acknowledge it to yourself and also to your athletes. So do a really good job there. In terms of feedback then, how would I focus on giving feedback? What feedback would I attend to first? What I would like to try to get you to do is to have the first feedback that you give to be focused on mentality. Then perhaps behavior. And only after those two, then am I going to be giving feedback about skill execution. And the reason for that is the skill execution is actually really late in this process. The skill execution depends on the mentality and the behavior, and those are what influence the skill execution. So I think we spend so much time talking about skill execution, and if we talk more about mentality and behavior, then the skill execution would follow. Okay, so some different concepts: be obvious, be specific, incorporate them into your physical training. So let's go back to our two teams now, Team A and Team B, and we can talk about some of these concepts of teaching mentality and behavior, and how would we now take that onto the court and use our DISC terminology to train our team on court. So if I'm training Team A, and I'm looking at our Team A group, I see that 3 of the 4 personality styles, dominant, cautious, and supportive, we are very well represented in those quadrants. You can see the glaring absence of anybody in our inspiring or our outgoing and people-oriented quadrant. So I have this information even before we step out onto the court. So I know as a coach, I'm going to train that mentality of being inspiring. So what does that mean? I'm going to use, again, the drills that I already use, but I'm going to now focus and help the athletes walk into, it's a term I use, walking into the inspiring style. I don't need them to live there, but if they want to play this particular sport, it requires really good communication. And so we need to, as a team, and again, I'm going to be obvious and I'm going to be really specific. We as a team need to grow in this area. We need to get better in this area. So we're going to use these drills and we're going to work on walking into the inspiring mentality. If I am talking to Team B and I'm training Team B, then they're going to have different areas, right? With Team B, holy cow, they are all go, 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 go. And so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to slow them down a little bit, and we're going to have to walk into the areas of being able to pay attention better, focus on details, calm down a little bit when the situation requires it. So again, just conceptually, that's how we might look at training those two teams a little bit differently. All right, I want to get to the nuts and bolts of how I like to teach mentality and behavior. So let's talk about cues and scripts. Cues and scripts is just the terminology that I like to use. And let's start with serving. So we've got 3 athletes. We're spending 10 minutes and we're going to work on serving. So we have Amy, let's say, and Amy has a tendency to toss the ball behind her. And our second player, Brooke, tends to, she's right-handed, but she tosses the ball over to her left shoulder. And Carly, our third player, mishits the ball a lot. She doesn't hit the back of the ball very often. And so she has a hard time watching contact. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce to them some different cues. So basically, in my definition, a cue is a specific one-word trigger or a mental focus that they are going to think about before they do the skill. So our 3 servers are probably they're going to have different cues. So for Amy, our first server, the one that needs to release the ball earlier, she tosses the ball behind her. We're going to remind her release early, and eventually that cue is going to need to be maybe early, or A for releasing it at point A that we've talked about. Brooke, on the other hand, she needs to toss the ball to her right shoulder. Eventually that cue needs to be just right. Again, just a one-word trigger so that they can focus just on that, so that that creates the action that you're looking for as the coach. You've determined that's what they need to do, and you're going to help them with the cue that they're going to think about before they take the action. For Carly, our third one, maybe we're talking to her about watch contact, and eventually that needs to be contact, or maybe it's watch. And again, maybe you let the athlete choose that, maybe you determine that. So just a progression with our 3 servers, right? They spend some time and you're watching them. You've determined the actions that you need to see so that they get better. And you're going to talk to each of them specifically about their cues, right? Our 3 servers, Amy, Brooke, and Carly, have different cues. You might cue them. Then what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm not going to cue you anymore. I'm going to ask you to make sure you remember to tell yourself your cue. Then it's really important to ask, okay, what percentage of the time right now, we just served for 3 minutes. Of that 3 minutes, what percentage of that time did you remember to cue yourself? Because here's the thing, they've never been asked to think about these things. So they're going to forget every once in a while. And so I might have to revisit one of those progressions. That's a lot to take in, I know, but hopefully as we go through this, it'll become a little bit more clear. As athletes acquire the skill you're looking for, so as Amy does a really good job of releasing early, then she may not need that cue anymore. Now she gets to move on to serving to different zones, and so now her cue may change. So we can progress through cues as the skill is acquired. Cues can be situational. So those same 3 servers, now let's pretend that they missed their last serve. Now their cue might have to change a little bit to, everybody, we want to watch their contact. So we just make sure we have a good contact because we don't want to miss another serve, right? Or after a timeout. So cues can be very situational. They might be different in different situations. Scripts is not, it's nothing more than a series of cues, and I recommend to not have more than 3, and your script must be in sequence. So for example, if I have a hitter and I need that hitting, right? Serving is a fairly simple skill, so we might have a script for serving, but it might just be a 1 cue. What is the most important thing for that athlete to focus on serving that allows them the best opportunity for success? With, let's say, attacking, it's a way more complicated skill. So we might need now the use of scripts. So we're going to define that as a series of cues. I recommend not doing more than 3. Most of the time what happens when we're giving feedback with attacking is we've got, as a coach, we're telling them, okay, I want you to wait. And then they wait and they go up and hit, and you go, okay, yeah, you waited well, but then you didn't snap your wrist. So now they go back and the next time they're focused on snapping their wrist, right? Guilty as charged. I have created overloaded athletes many times in my career. So What I have found the best method in this situation where there's a lot of sequential information is to break it down into an order, no more than 3, and the brain can only hold one thought at a time. And so I've got to do a good job as a coach of also remembering that. So here's my sequence for our outside hitter that we're training. The first one is, gosh, you know, we want her to swing her arms, big arms, which eventually needs to just become either big or arms or fast arms or whatever the word is, the cue for her. She doesn't plant her heel very well, so that cue needs to become either plant or heel or whatever that athlete feels most comfortable with. And then finally, she doesn't snap her wrist at the end. And so that cue at the end needs to either be wrist or finish or topspin or whatever the particular cue needs to be. So as the coach, I'm going to help her with those cues initially. I'm going to toss her a ball and I'm going to go, remember, arms, plant, finish, arms, plant, finish. And I'm going to help her to remember those cues. Then I'm going to allow her to do it and ask her to make sure she's reminding herself. I'm going to watch some reps and then I'm going to ask questions. Hey, how well has that been going? How do those work for you? Are those good cues for you, or do we need to change them? Right? So now I'm asking her a lot of questions. And here's the really cool thing about that I have found in scripts. Let's say oftentimes what'll happen is, for example, her first cue, the big arms, ends up fixing the plant. So when she does really big arms, oh my gosh, she plants her heel. Physiologically, you know, that has an impact. So really cool. Now we don't need to have her focus on planting because the big arms has solved that. So now it just becomes big arms, finish. A couple of reasons that I think are really, really powerful as to why cues and scripts are the answer here. One is that we are now creating ownership. Now is on the players to do a really good job of growing through their skills, right? So now we've given the responsibility to them to remember their cues instead of us just telling them over and over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, so I'll try not to belabor that, but let's move on here. The reason that I started using cues and scripts is because I recognized for myself, and as I watched coaches give feedback to athletes, that there's this disconnect. It takes too much time and too much feedback to create a different action or the action that you're looking for out of your players. So cues and scripts is a better way. If I want to change my athlete's behavior or skill execution, then what I really want to do is I want to influence their thoughts. For example, I watched a college coach a couple months ago, and he talked to an athlete. He said, okay, I want you to do a really good job of waiting. And so he would say, wait, wait, wait. And she was early. He's like, yeah, you're still early. You're still early. And he walked away and he started talking to another athlete. And I watched her hit for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and she was still early. And so I pulled her over and I said, hey, so tell me what your coach is having you work on right now. And she said, on waiting. And I said, okay, in the last 3 minutes, how many times have you reminded yourself to wait? And she kind of looked at me like, huh? So I said, all right, for the next 3 minutes, before you hit every single time, I want you to cue yourself to wait. So what have we done? We've made the athletes more responsible for their learning and growth. That's going to make them mentally tougher. All right, and mental toughness is what we're going for. I am now not just telling athletes what to do, but I'm helping to mold them into becoming learners and thinkers. And again, all that does is help their mental strength. I put this up here again just because now, instead of talking about the outcome, you can talk about what the root cause of the outcome is, and that's their cues and scripts. Anytime cues and scripts don't seem like they're working, then there's 2 things that could be happening. One is they're not cueing themselves, they're not attending to it enough, or 2, the cue just doesn't fit. And so that's when I might say to the athlete, hey, let's change this up. Let's come up with a different word. All right, as we talk about drills now, again, we don't need to reinvent drills. Use the same drills that you've used and that you know are really good. And we just want to provide the athletes within those drills opportunities to fail and to struggle and to flounder, to fight through and to succeed. So different drills will create different mental challenges that our athletes can work through. Some of those drills, let's make sure that we set up to be exclusively and only, I think that's a little redundant, but you can tell how important it is, for mentality emphasis. Here's the tough one here, is once you set those drills up and say, all right, right now we are training to take a rip, because when it's 13-all in the third set to win the championship, we're going to be the aggressive team. We're going to be the team that's willing to take the risk. So you set up a drill and you say, okay, it's going to be a 3-person backcourt attacking drill, a right back, a middle back, a left back, a setter on each side. And so you have 4 athletes on the court competing against each other. And the only criteria you have set up is, as an attacker, you have to take a rip. Okay, that's my way of saying you have to hit the ball as hard as you have ever hit the ball. Now, here's the challenge for us as coaches, and that is to hold the players accountable to that mental focus, not the physical outcome. So we go through this drill and first player goes up and takes a rip and she hits it out. Instead of correcting and teaching her and telling her how to hit it in, you are so excited. You're going, that was awesome. That's a great swing. Okay, really good, because you are focused on the focus, which is hitting the ball really hard. Play goes on, and now an athlete goes up and hits a ball, and she hits it at half speed, and it goes down for a kill. And you blow the whistle, and you say, no, you got to take a rip. And she looks at you and goes, but I got to kill. Yes, I understand you got to kill. That's great, but that's not what we're training right now. What we're training right now is taking a rip. So I'm going to toss you another ball, and you're going to go up and take a rip. It's tough coaching wise to just remember to focus on the focus, and that is the mentality. That is not the physical outcome or execution. It's going to take your athletes a few minutes to get used to that. Once they get used to it, now it becomes important to them. They realize that they're being held accountable to it. So now they're going to focus on whatever the mentality is that you're looking for. When you're doing drills now where you're focused on what your athlete's thought process is, because again, if I want to influence thoughts, I need to know what the thoughts are. And so now when we're in drills, a lot of the time you're just going to be asking questions. Hey, did you cue yourself on that? No, I forgot. Well, you can't forget. If we want to be consistent, if we want to be a consistent defender, you need to consistently be in the right place. So you need to consistently remind yourself and give yourself that cue. Defensively, you know how many times are you going to tell your athletes, be stopped, be stopped, be stopped? I got tired of that. And so now I'm asking them to remind themselves to be stopped. And now my job is just to reinforce that. We're kind of going backwards a little bit. Another really important thing, especially in our take a rip drill or our what we would call dominant mentality, using the DISC common language that we all have. Especially, we're going to praise effort over skill, especially when it comes to risk taking. Research shows that only 10% of the athletes that you're working with are comfortable and it's okay with them to take risks. And so it's really important when you see them exhibiting that effort, because it's going to take effort for 90% of your athletes to want to go up and take a rip, especially at 13-all. But we have to practice that mentality. So make sure that you do a really good job of praising that effort to go there over whatever the execution might be, okay, especially in the risk taking. Finally, our fourth pillar, our fourth cornerstone in building our house. And again, we're only getting to about the framing of the house, right? Today's webinar is only on the early season portion of things. A mid-season would be it's a different webinar. But it's really important that we also finish with the fourth pillar, and that is to recommit. You're not going to like this, but I'm going to ask you to finish your practices 10 to 15 minutes before the end of practice. Now, believe me, I used to write practice and we would get through half of it, and I couldn't figure out how that happened, right? So I get it. I get the concept of, no, we need to, I can't, no, we got to keep and push through. The last 10 minutes, if we spend that time debriefing, any repetitions that we were going to do in those 10 minutes are not anywhere close to as valuable as the debrief session. Okay, so what might that look like in terms of debriefing? Hey, let's all come on in, and I want the athletes to do most of the talking in that debriefing. I know for myself as a coach, you can tell talking it comes pretty naturally to me. I don't have a problem talking. So my job is to, in the debrief session, is to ask them questions. What went well? I personally like us to go around and talk about what went well. Again, today we're talking about developing mentally strong athletes. They're going to know exactly what they didn't do well. They're going to tell you all the mistakes they made in practice that night. And I'm not interested in that. If I want to develop confident athletes, then what I need to do is make sure that I help them to understand and point out and recognize and embrace the things that they're doing well. So I'm going to say, yeah, I don't care what you didn't do well. I want to know what you did do well. Give me 2 things. And so we'll go around the circle and ask that. That might be something that if you want to, you can have them journal that in your 50-cent journal that you bought for them. You might ask them to journal that. But I really like to ask athletes the things that happen well. You know, if they're not telling themselves what didn't go well, their parents are telling them anyway. So let's do a good job of helping them to become mentally tougher because we're building their confidence. We might talk about what were the team accomplishments. Man, I felt like we took a step up today. What was that? What accomplishments do we have? Or what setbacks do we have? How did we manage it? Did we manage it well or not? What are we going to do differently? We might talk about adjustments or changes that they think we need to make. Bottom line, or really importantly, as we go through this debriefing, 10 or 15 minutes, again, I'm asking the athletes to do most of the talking here. We're going to recommit. We're going to take that time. We're going to recommit to getting better. Our goal here is growth, right? And I want them always to leave practice or to leave a tournament looking forward. And so we're going to recommit to the effort that we're all going to put forth going forward and moving forward. And so that's kind of what the debriefing is going to look like. So I feel really strongly that these 4 building blocks, planning, especially reminding ourselves to have patience, building that trust, taking the time to create that trust formation, teaching using the nuts and bolts of cues and scripts, and then recommitting in our debrief. Feel really strongly that those 4 things are all really important, especially in our early season training. Whatever time that it feels like we're taking too much time, then we more than make up for at the end of the season. Our house is really strong, our foundation is great, and so we don't have to revisit and go backwards. Okay, things don't fall apart in the middle of the season. We have created a really strong foundation. Here's a few of the areas and the programs that we've facilitated for various groups. These are just a few of the workshops that we have conducted with different teams. I would love to answer any questions that we might have right now. If you don't have time to ask them now, feel free to contact me at any time. I want to thank the JVA. I have enjoyed tremendously presenting to you, and I want to turn it back over to Erin and answer some questions if you have any. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mora. We do have a couple questions here waiting for you. How often do you feel a coach should meet with their players to evaluate or debrief?
For me, I like to debrief at least for a few minutes after every practice, after every tournament. And so I just think that connection and that bond and that trust, and I always want to make sure that they're leaving practice excited about growing and excited about coming back and working on more things. So I want to make sure that I'm setting the tone for how they leave practice, because they're going to get in the car. And what's probably going to happen is the parent's going to go, hey, how's practice, honey? And the athlete's going to go, oh, well, it wasn't. I want to create and help them to come up with some thoughts as they get into the car.
Okay. And do you share the athletes' personality profiles with the whole team, or do you keep those to yourself?
I absolutely share. We're all in this together. I want them to know how I'm wired. I think it just creates a lot more patience, and it creates a lot more understanding, and it ends up preempting any misunderstandings that we have about each other. So we're in this together. We've got to do this together. And so the more I understand you and you understand me, doesn't it follow then that we're going to be more effective and more efficient, and we're going to have a better time doing what we're doing? So I absolutely want them to know about each other. And the cool thing about them seeing each other and themselves is people love talking about themselves. I mean, it's really fun to share and engage with your team. Oh my gosh, look at it, we're really close together. I mean, the bigger issue when you're facilitating DISC and the personality styles is getting them to stop talking about it, which, oh my gosh, what a good problem to have.
All right, thank you. Another question, it's more of a situational question. If you have a player who dominates on the B side in practice, but is very error prone, hesitant, and not confident when you put her in during the match, what cues or feedback can you use to help her improve?
Okay, so she's great it sounds like she's great when the pressure's not on. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, so with that athlete, I'm not going to pretend like that's not there. So we're going to talk about it. Hey, when you're on this side, you're great. And so you earn a right to move to the other side. But then when you're there, that's when you struggle. So maybe her cues need to be more along the lines of mentality. So maybe she needs to calm herself down. I've worked with a collegiate athlete recently, and when she was passing, her cue was beach. She chose it, and that just helped her to calm down a little bit. In DISC terminology, we would talk about walking into the supportive style, where you're more stable and calm. And so I would try to figure out with her, hey, what is going to help you to relax when you're here? But definitely she's probably thinking about 1,000 different things, in which case she's not going to be thinking about anything. So again, probably too much going on. So let's simplify it and come up with a couple things. Deep breathing, a deep breath is physiologically, research has shown that's really effective.
All right, next question. When teams continue to fail on the challenging drill, what are things you can say or do to continue to motivate them and encourage them to stay engaged and accomplish the task?
When they are continually failing to a challenging drill.
Yes.
Okay, so probably what I would do is separate that into a little bit more bite-sized bits. So I would put a time limit on it. Hey, we've got, X number of minutes to get through this. If we don't, then in our debrief, we're going to recommit to trying that drill again tomorrow and getting better tomorrow. So a couple things. If I've got to do a good job as a coach of gauging, all right, if our team cannot ever accomplish this, then is the challenge too great for where my team is right now? So I might come down on the challenge a little bit with the concept of, then tomorrow we've got to do one more or two more, and the next day we've got to do more. So is it a failure of the athletes, or is the drill too challenging at this point in the season? But again, I would certainly have that conversation. I even think that those two questions are really good. So is this drill too challenging, or do we want to push through a little bit? You guys are floundering. Okay, do you want to push through a little bit? Is the physical challenge too hard, or are they struggling mentally with it? And just to even have that conversation and see if, a lot of times they might come back with, no, let's keep pushing through, and it's okay. It's okay if they fail, right? They've got to figure out how to get better. So a couple things. One is to do a good job of gauging, is this realistic or not at this point? And then B, let's go backwards a step, because it just might be that if they get 5 less reps today, they're going to get 20 more the next day, just because now they believe in themselves.